Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Samar Hasan and I'm the founder of Epiphany. मेरा नाम समर हसन है और जैसे कि आप जानते हैं मैं फाउंडर हूँ सोशल एंटरप्राइज इदारे की जिसका नाम है एपिफनी। और आज का सेशन भी हमें इंग्लिश में कंडक्ट करना होगा क्योंकि हमारे पास जो हमारी गेस्ट हैं वो इंटरनेशनल हैं। सो वी विल हैव टू कंडक्ट द इंटायर सेशन इन इंग्लिश. Since our guest is international and she understands English, of course, I haven't started teaching her Urdu yet, but I'm super excited to have her. Very quickly, I'd like to do a brief intro in Urdu, just in case there are people who are watching from Pakistan as well, and then we'll switch to English. तो जल्दी से आपको ये बताना चाह रही थी कि आज का टॉपिक बहुत ही इम्पोर्टेंट है. आज का टॉपिक है रीइमेजिनिंग फिलैंथ्रोपी एंड सिविल सोसाइटी इनिशिएटिव्स, द रोल ऑफ द एंटरप्रेन्योर. तो हम काफ़ी दफ़ा एंटरप्रेन्योर की तो बात कर रहे होते हैं, काफ़ी दफ़ा आपने हमारे सेशंस भी अटेंड किए हैं जिसमें एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप के बारे में जिक्र होता है, लेकिन आज का जो टॉपिक है वो इंट्राप्रेन्योर के बारे में है और कैसे आप किसी भी इदारे के अंदर रहते हुए, वहाँ पे जॉब करते हुए, कैसे क्रिएटिविटी, इनोवेशन, प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग, उस तरह का माइंडसेट डेवलप करते हैं और कैसे आजकल के ज़माने में स्पेशली क्योंकि हम कोविड की वजह से बहुत डीपली अफेक्टेड हैं, कैसे हम इसको यूटिलाइज कर सकते हैं, नॉट जस्ट फॉर आवर ओन बेटरमेंट बट ऑल्सो फॉर इनेबलिंग बेटर लाइवलीहुड्स फॉर एवरीवन. किस तरह हम इम्पैक्ट क्रिएट कर सकते हैं और क्या चेंजिंग रोल है फिलैंथ्रोपी का इस मोमेंट इन टाइम पे. और दूसरी तरफ जो सिविल सोसाइटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हैं, जो तमाम इदारे हैं जो कि अपनी कम्युनिटीज़ में काम करते हैं, उनको कैसे हम हाउ कैन दे लेवरेज दैट इनोवेशन माइंडसेट दैट दे मे हैव हैड, they may have been utilizing, लेकिन कैसे उसको और बेहतर तरीके से यूज कर सकते हैं. So हमारे साथ एक बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग गेस्ट है, उनका नाम है नैंसी मर्फी. शी इज जॉइनिंग अस फ्रॉम द यूएस, and she is essentially somebody I want to learn from, right? And that's why I ended up inviting her for this particular session. So I hope you're going to make the most of it. Please do type in and send in your questions. अपने सवालात ज़रूर बताइएगा. I'm happy कि मैं उसको इंग्लिश में ट्रांसलेट कर दूँ. अगर आपकी फर्स्ट लैंग्वेज इंग्लिश नहीं है, that's perfectly okay. And without much ado, I'm going to just bring her on the virtual stage. Hi, Nancy. Hello.
Hello, Samar. Great to be here.
Absolutely, so fantastic to learn from you today. I didn't do your intro without you, behind you really. So let me just do a quick brief intro. And essentially, look, so Nancy has done multiple things in her life. So she's got a consulting background, more than 10 years that she spent, in the consulting area. Besides that, she's also been part of different philanthropic initiatives. She's running her own, so she's an entrepreneur as well. She created Intrapreneurs Influence Lab 2 years back, more than 2 years back.
Now. 3 years,
So
yeah.
3 years now, wow, which is essentially a leadership program for people leading big change, and how they can, while remaining within different organizations, how can they actually create a lot of impactful change. And there's a bunch of other stuff which I'm just going to invite Nancy to introduce herself, because I'm sure you can do a much speedier version of your introduction. So yes, Nancy, go ahead.
Great. Well, thank you again. I'm happy to be here and appreciate the opportunity to speak with your audience. So I describe myself as someone who helps change leaders, persuade and influence others so that they can realize their vision for change faster with less frustration, isolation, and resistance. So. And a part of the way that I do that is
beautiful, by the way.
Thank you.
That's beautifully phrased, because a lot of times very creative people, problem solvers, they may be trying to make change, but there are hurdles upon hurdles upon hurdles, right? And I think that's fantastic that you're able to help them speed up that process and hack time.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So tell us how you embarked on this journey.
Oh, well, as I often describe for people who want to know my career path, it was long and winding and not very direct. I'll move my water bottle out of the screen there. Not very direct and not always clear. I don't think I ever could have imagined when I was young or coming right out of university that I would be doing what I'm doing now. And yet, in hindsight, when I look back, all the steps made sense, and the things that I enjoyed doing and that I'm good at are the things that I'm doing now. And the path probably should have been obvious, but I will tell people, if you're feeling confused or that your career path is long and winding, then you're probably on the right road. So I've worked in philanthropy, with family foundations, with trade associations or support groups for philanthropy. I've worked in the private sector with Fortune 50 companies and their philanthropy and sustainability and CSR efforts. I've worked in small nonprofits and large nonprofits and for the federal government in the US. And so I think for me, what enables me to succeed now and to really help change agents working within large established organizations is the fact that I've got experience in all these different sectors, and I can be that translator, if you will, and that bridge between and among the different groups.
I love, again, there's so much that I'm taking away already, right? So it's wonderful how you describe it, that it is sometimes a very long and winding journey, right? And I've always personally, when I was younger, I used to be so envious of people when they told me, oh, they knew exactly what they wanted to be, right? So this is a common question that young people come across. Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the answer is, some people don't know. I was one of those who never knew. And literally, even at, even during university time, it was really through a process of elimination that I ended up, realizing what I wanted to do. And again, I'm not nowhere. I think a lot of people don't end up practicing what they study. So I think it's very interesting how, later on you can connect the dots and be like, oh, yeah, this is why I was doing that. And this is how I can leverage this particular connection or learning or whatever it is. So very good to hear that, because sometimes people tend to box themselves in. And I think you're somebody who's just, meandered and done so many different things and really, landed upon what you're supposed to be doing. But if I were to ask you, what is the role that you enjoyed the most out of everything that you've done?
Oh, throughout my career? Wow. Well, interestingly, I would say, maybe I'll answer that two ways. The places I worked and the role in those places that I enjoyed the most was when I was in consulting environments. And I think that's because I have many different interests. That's why it was always hard for me to kind of nail down one obvious kind of narrow career path. I have lots of issues that I care about, causes that I care about. I love to learn. I mean, I want to absorb. I read a ton. I listen to a ton of podcasts and shows like yours. And I just really love learning. And when you're in a consulting role, every time you get a new client or a new project, it's like getting a new job, and you get to immerse yourself in a new culture, in a new industry, in new problems or challenges. And so those roles were the ones that sort of fed my soul the most, and I think leveraged my skills. And that's why I decided to start my own company. I would say the other role that was never a formal job that I had, but has always been a part of how I approached my consulting. And even when I was a child, I'm the oldest of 4 girls. And I used to gather all my sisters and all of our friends in our basement and make them play school.
Okay. All right.
The role that I embrace the most, that I really enjoy, is that of the teacher. And so how can I help others learn from my experience and all the information and knowledge that I've tried to absorb in my life?
So I know it's going to sound super philosophical right now, right? And not a lot of people want to listen to philosophical stuff. But I will have you, I just want to share that, when you have this, let's say, when you have this interest in imparting knowledge, in my experience, the more you share, the more you keep getting, right? The more it keeps coming and transferring, because you're transferring knowledge. And everybody realizes at the end of the day, oh, okay, go to this person because this person has information and this person is happy to impart information. And before you know it, you're just, absorbing so much more. So I think that's that's very interesting. By the way, they call me my entrepreneurs. They call me the ma'am,
The map.
which is
Oh,
just
I love
crazy. Anyway, okay, so tell us, because you just mentioned reading and podcasts and stuff. So
it.
what would you recommend for people who are leading different CSOs or part of different civil society organizations, and on the other hand, the people who are part of philanthropic initiatives? Would there be, what are your top books to read? What are some of the podcasts that they should be looking at?
Yeah. So I always hesitate to say my top books because it depends on which 10 I'm in the middle of at any given point in time. Like I just have favorites depending on, I think, what I need or what I'm curious about at any given time. So I suppose that's my number one tip is absorb as much as you can, and not only authors who are, I've worked with a lot of higher education institutions and different courses and things, and I look at their list of leadership books, and they tend to all be written by white men from a very limited perspective. And yes, those are the ones that are famous or well known or well respected, but there are all sorts of reasons why that's true. That may or may not have anything to do with the quality of the book. And yes, those are fabulous, but look for those hidden authors or those unusual books that, I'll read things by, Rumi, the Sufi poet, and bring that into my leadership and intrapreneurs training. I read a ton from the psychology, persuasion, and influence perspective. So things by Robert Cialdini, he's sort of the guru of persuasion and influence, and I think makes his books really accessible. And I just sort of look for what are other people in my sphere also talking about? What books are they recommending by people who are maybe from other parts of the world or bring a different perspective that I would not normally see on the top of my reading list or on the shelf obvious in the library. So just really being open and looking for those topics. So I wouldn't just read leadership books, right? Because those give you a certain take on leadership, of course, but there are lessons and insight that we can gain from all sorts of disciplines, not just leadership.
It's very interesting that you mentioned Rumi. So there's a series that I started very recently, during COVID times, and I don't know, a lot of people had been pushing me to start my own YouTube channel, and I just hadn't taken the plunge. And the first series that I've started is called Impacting Lives, which aims to really, document leadership journeys of different people. Who've led impactful lives, right? And the quote that inspired me, that is, behind it, is actually by Rumi, where he says, "With life as short as a half-taken breath, don't plant anything but love." Right? And and I think, there you go, right? I think we're so. I'm really happy that we ended up bringing you on the show. So let's jump now. Let's start talking about entrepreneurship. Would you like to describe and define who entrepreneurs are? How would you describe them?
Yes. So intrapreneurs, unlike entrepreneurs, are ones who are leading change within large established organizations. So, and I think there's a role for both when we're talking about social change, environmental change, improving the world. So social entrepreneurs will see an opportunity or a need or a gap, a problem, a challenge, and they will start a new organization as the way to address that or seize that opportunity. And oftentimes they're super creative, very innovative, but their impact initially is, this big. It's tiny. And it may be decades before they're able to reach the scale, if ever, that organizations that maybe have been around for 20, 40, 100 years that have reach already across an entire community or country or multiple countries, but may have gotten stuck in an old way of doing things and are maybe not always as creative or innovative or able to see new possibilities. And so we rely on those leaders inside those organizations who are working every day to make them more effective, more efficient, more equitable, more innovative, and get them to maybe take a new approach to solving the old problem that unfortunately, probably has persisted over 100 years if the organization still exists.
So obviously they play a very, very critical role because all of the entrepreneurs then on the outside need to be working with individuals within the organization to make change happen, right? And now in this COVID world, how do you see their role evolving and growing?
Yeah. So, one of the reasons I'm so excited about working with intrapreneurs and having been in those roles and failed miserably oftentimes before, because I didn't know all of this stuff at the time, is because inside the large organizations, we have the potential to leverage the reach, the scale, the expertise, the stability, the resources to achieve impact faster. But the status quo is a powerful thing. The gravitational pull of the old ways of doing things is incredibly strong. Where I think the role of the intrapreneur is going to shift or has the potential to shift right now is because everything is in upheaval already. There's so much disruption in every part of the world. I mean, everywhere, right? This isn't isolated to certain countries or certain communities. It's everywhere. Every industry, every community is disrupted. So the status quo is already in upheaval. It's the perfect time for intrapreneurs with a little more support and some tools and techniques to really take advantage of this moment to make huge leaps forward. Things that just months ago seemed entirely impossible are now very possible. And so I think intrapreneurs are even more important than ever. If we're going to come out of this on the other side as, at the very least, as not having put more people in poverty or had worse health outcomes for people in many places of the world, or put more women and girls at risk. If we're not going to get any worse on the other side of this and perhaps make huge leaps forward, it's only going to be if these intrapreneurs are able to take advantage of this moment and leverage all the power of their organizations to help us flourish going forward.
And in your opinion, what do you think would be some of the strategies to nurture these intrapreneurs? And, so one, and just, specifically, so whether civil society organizations, what can they do to nurture them? Government sector, so, different across different sectors, what could be some of these strategies?
Well, I think one strategy that is sector agnostic, if you will, so it doesn't matter, it's universal across all sectors, is if there are intrapreneurs in your midst, and you probably know them because you might think of them right now as the troublemakers or the agitators, or those people that maybe you hide from in the hallway because they're always telling you we got to do things differently, or we should stop doing this and start doing that. Those people who, in the midst of all of this, when so many in our organizations only see the problems or what's not possible, they're the ones seeing what is possible and seeing the opportunity and getting really excited about the potential for change. So if you can identify those people in your midst, no matter what sector you're in, invite them to the table for your problem solving, really, instead of hiding from them in the hallway, which I guess none of us are doing now because we're all in our homes, but seek them out, get their best thinking, facilitate their leadership, even if they're the CEO of the organization and you're a board member and you've been hesitant to get on board with some crazy ideas you thought that this person had, maybe now she's your best ticket out of this. So, really invest in their leadership. So that's a universal strategy, no matter what sector you're in, is let's find these people and let's unlock their potential. I think, civil society and philanthropy in particular, and even some governments have gotten so in love with this idea of the social entrepreneur. We really celebrate them, and we have fellowships and, things like that, which are all important. And I don't discourage that. But let's make sure we're also celebrating the intrapreneurs and investing in their continued development. Because like I said, if they're successful, they have the potential to unlock, huge resources for social change at a much faster scale. So we need both.
Okay. So look, I think this is a natural segue to talk a little bit more about this Intrapreneurs Influence Lab that you created, right? And obviously we understand we've already established the need for it, but exactly what does it do? And, what are some of the, maybe let's talk through some of the exciting projects that you may have done in, through this lab.
Yeah. So the Intrapreneurs Influence Lab is a skill building support group community of like-minded entrepreneurs. So it's both a space and a mindset and tools and techniques. It's all of those things supporting individual entrepreneurs within organizations and groups of entrepreneurs within organizations. So whether it's a city agency in Baltimore, Maryland, here in the US, who has some leaders who are really trying to envision and make real a very different way of supporting people who are seeking jobs and a career path and economic opportunity in that city, and making sure that those opportunities are equally available to people of all races, that the outcomes for economic opportunity are equal. And so there's a lot that those leaders can get out of the lab in terms of understanding how to move big organizations. Where are all of the things that I call artifacts, all those little things we leave behind that actually tell us, nope, we actually value a different way of working. We value the old way of doing things. So in the lab, one of the things we do are help leaders identify all those little things that get in the way or that confuse people when you say, we're doing things this way now. And then actually all of the paperwork, all of the processes and protocol or the systems that are in place are designed to support the old way. So that's one of the things we do in the lab. Interestingly, so the lab is kind of the big home for all things entrepreneurs in my company. But we also have other things that different tools and things that we'll provide to entrepreneurs. And back at the beginning of early days of COVID times, I realized that pretty much everyone is leading change right now, whether they want to or not. And so we created a 30-day survival kit for change leaders. And it's what's great about that is it takes all the things that I teach in the lab around your own leadership and how to show up as the leader that people will follow, all the ways to work with your team and your supervisors to get them on board, how to identify the champions for your change and enroll them in co-creating the vision, all the things that get in the way of succeeding, the three different types of resistance to change and how to overcome them. So we took all of that and put it into really short 3 to 6 minute video trainings, video messages that people get in their inbox every morning for 30 days with some reflection questions that they can journal about, and then one action item. And there are a few tools people can download there too. So in less than 15 minutes a day, people get some really concrete things that they can do to lead through this change more effectively.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds particularly useful, especially because there is just so much information out there now, right? And if you have to read through, not everybody will make time to read as much as possible, right? So I think this is really useful. And once again, obviously I should have known, right? It is communications, a part of your, organization's name. So tell us more about the publication that you recently did, Crisis as Catalyst. And what were you thinking? What are the objectives behind it? Who is it for? How would you recommend that they use this particular resource?
Yeah. So I'll tell a little bit of a story, which is how we got to the Crisis as Catalyst. But back in the early days after the 9/11 terrorist attacks in the US, I was working with UPS, the global logistics company. And they had some initiatives around volunteerism, and they certainly had logistics expertise in the disaster space. And I was seeing an opportunity when there were tons of volunteers that were showing up at the Pentagon, at the World Trade Center, in other places, wanting to do something to help on September 12th. And there was little for them to do in that moment. But knowing that 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from them, there would be lots of need and opportunity for volunteers to make a difference, but no way but people would have moved on by then, or no one would have captured their information and been able to engage them later. And so we worked with the Federal Emergency Management Agency here in the US and this national network of volunteer centers, and created a whole set of practices and protocols to engage volunteers in what the Federal Emergency Management Agency calls the full cycle of disasters. So when COVID struck, I was immediately reminded of that moment, almost 20 years ago now, where I was seeing the same thing happen over and over again. And we see it in small disasters, crises, and in large, whether it's a earthquake, a flood, or something bigger like a global pandemic. That people naturally want to help in the moment of the crisis. But that's not always when the help is needed most, or it's certainly not the only time when the help is needed. And that's true for philanthropy as well. So many of the philanthropic organizations here in the US were starting to, put lots of money into immediate relief in the early days. But we know this is going to be a long road to recovery.
Yep.
And I think it also made clearer, brought to light some systemic challenges that were making the pandemic worse for some organizations and for some people. So why do so many civil society organizations have very little money in reserve? And all of a sudden, they couldn't do what they were doing or raise money the way they normally do. They were going to go out of business. Well, why is that? Why are certain communities more vulnerable to COVID than others? And so very long story there, but that got me excited to work with Philanthropy for Active Civic Engagement, a group here in the US, to figure out what we could do to remind civil society organizations, philanthropy in particular, that crises aren't just about the response. They're about the long-term recovery, the mitigation. What can we do to make the impact of a crisis less? And they're about preparedness. How can we help people be ready for when the next crisis happens? Because inevitably something will happen. So how do we elongate that response that people want to, are inclined to do for a short time? How do we make it? So the guide is designed to challenge people to think beyond the immediate response, and it's really a conversation starter is what we call it. So it's not prescriptive, but it does give people lots of questions to ask within their organizations in partnership with their communities and other stakeholders to get them to think differently, to consider, now that the status quo is in total upheaval, those things that they thought they could never do differently inside their organization, they already did differently. In 24 hours, they made the decision to do that. So why would they ever have to go back to doing it the old way? So that's how we hope people will use the guide, is to have conversations within their organizations to consider what might be possible to do differently going forward.
So I'm just sharing an anecdote here, which is really, I think, very similar to a lot of organizations that I've spoken to. There are so many things that we keep putting off because there's never enough time, and you keep saying, oh yeah, tomorrow, we'll do it next month, we'll do it 6 months from now, etc. And now is really an opportunity. So for instance, all of these, the YouTube channel, the gaming vertical that we're exploring, all of these webinars, all of this content creation that we're doing, because we really think that this is important. All of this wouldn't have happened before. And the entire digital transformation that has happened across the world, the amount of collaboration that's taking place, people are just coming out of their isolationist kind of mindset. I think all of that is particularly useful. Now, I have a very kind of like a personal question to ask you. Yeah. So one of our very good friends, right? She has acted as a host as well for one of our webinars. She's from Lebanon. But she's based in Europe, in Germany at the moment. And one of my colleagues was having a conversation with her about what she wants to do and how we can help her. And of course, in the immediate short run, philanthropy needs to kick in just for immediate fundraising and support and just disbursement of funds. But how? Because we're working on impact entrepreneurship. So what would you recommend for us as an organization? How do you think we could support her in a bit more structured manner? Because quick philanthropy, or let's say crisis, humanitarian crisis, this is not something that Epiphany has done previously. But what would you suggest to me as the leader of my organization who really wants to help her? What could we possibly do?
Yeah, great question. So what I'm going to suggest, obviously the urgent needs matter. If we don't get relief in the immediate wake of a disaster, of a crisis, the long term won't matter, right? So that said, I guess I would encourage you to talk to your friend about, can she pause for 30 seconds, a really brief time, and look at what else is happening right now from addressing the immediate relief needs, the urgent needs. And not that there will ever be enough, but could she think about, and could you help her do something now, if there's still a need, which I'm sure there is, and think about perhaps using the conversation starter, the guide that we created, the Crisis is Catalyst, can this be a catalyst to have some conversations about, well, why is Lebanon in such a precarious position from a food security perspective in the first place? What systems and policies are contributing to that? Why are certain groups of people in Lebanon more vulnerable than others? What can we do to help address that challenge going forward? Who else do we need to talk to? What are the perspectives of the people most impacted by this crisis? What do they need? How can their voice become part of this long-term solution? And so it's not that the urgent needs aren't there, and that raising money in the immediate wake of a crisis can be very effective, because people see, we're human. We see the need. We want to give, want to do something. Yes, we should do that. And perhaps some of the money you raise right now is set aside to address some longer term things once the immediate crisis subsides.
Okay, that sounds like very sound advice. I was just thinking, right, maybe in those areas, because at the end of the day, I keep going back to what we do best, and that is entrepreneurship, right? And entrepreneurship support, and how can we empower some of these? There are going to be new people who will come on board, and some of the older ones who've already been working in the country. And how can we, really facilitate them? But this is really sound advice. Thank you. And in a way, also, it's kind of like bringing back, okay, how can we use crisis as catalyst? The toolkit as well. Okay, all right. So let me ask you a question which we talked about briefly as well, but a little bit more from the philanthropy side, right? So what is kind of like the new role that you're seeing for philanthropy? And in a way, they are also they have to reinvent the wheel. They have to reinvent themselves. Otherwise, philanthropy, the way it was happening, perhaps is not what is required right now in the world. The kind of complex problems that we're faced with. So what would you advise for philanthropic organizations, donor agencies, bilateral, multilateral donors, maybe small foundations, family foundations, maybe corporate foundations? So kind of like, across the board on that side, what are some of the strategies that you would recommend for them?
Well, so those are all very different organizations, and the ways that they engage with civil society and solving problems are going to be very different. But that said, universally, I would say for all of them, for all of philanthropy, my big call to action, the thing I hope everyone takes away from this conversation, is that crises are more than the immediate response. So if philanthropy is only thinking about what can I do to provide immediate relief now, or even over the next 3 months, then we're missing the opportunity. We're going to end up in the same place, perpetuating the same underlying challenges that make crises a minor inconvenience for some and absolutely tragic for others. And that is not what I hope happens on the other side of this. I hope we seize the opportunity to, now that the status quo is in total upheaval, we're amidst tons of disruption, let's not let things settle back where they were before. So no matter what type of philanthropic organization you're in, take this moment to think about, to use the guide, to ask the questions. What policies and procedures did we have in place before that actually, in the wake of the crisis, exacerbated the crisis? And what did we undo or create flexibility around, or invest differently in the immediate wake of the crisis? And why can't we do that all the time? If we, allowed the grantees to have total flexibility in the immediate wake of the crisis to use the resources for what they needed most, why can't we do that all the time? What are the power dynamics in the philanthropic civil society organization relationship that it's really about time we have some serious conversations about undoing?
I think that's very interesting, right? So I was on a conversation with somebody just recently, and she heads up a fund. And this is what she told me that, look, right now, we're not looking to make social impact investments. We're actually giving out grants just to facilitate the companies that we believe in or the companies that we would like to support. We're just giving them grants to utilize as they wish, right? And I'm sure that the monitoring and reporting requirements, which are sometimes just,
Right.
they take away so much from what you're trying to do and trying to achieve, right? And a lot of times you may come across this, and we were talking about it the other day as well, right? That
Yeah.
as a young organization with limited staff members, and you want to do so much, you actually want to be part of the, action.
Yeah.
You sometimes shy away from applying for a lot of these opportunities because it just takes so much time away from your core business, which is creating impact, right? So
Right.
I think that's very, very, very well said. So as a lead on to this question, right? So what are some of the strategies then for the future which can help organizations navigate so that they're better prepared moving forward, right? So you've talked about, okay, reflect, think back. Right now, of course, everybody is just so busy trying to cope with the crisis. But what could be some additional strategies so that they are just better prepared, better equipped? Cash flow management, like you mentioned, right? Other things, right? So what are some of the things that they could watch out for from today?
Yeah. So I think I'm gonna say something that may feel like it's not actionable enough for people, and yet I feel like this is the biggest mistake oftentimes that organizations make. So yes, use the guide, use the questions to have some conversations in your organization about what you can do differently, what your blind spots are. Related to that, I think any organization, I mean, I'm doing this in my own business right now. I've been doing it periodically since March. Really make time to learn. When you look at what's happened over the last 4 months or 5 months, however long it's been now, what can we learn about the way we operated, the structure of our team, the approaches that we had to doing the work that are meeting our mission? What worked well and served us well in the moment of crisis? What worked well in our own immediate response? And what did this crisis illuminate? What did it show us? What did it teach us about where we're vulnerable, about where we can be better prepared next time, about things we thought we could never do that we actually can do. So this whole 30-day survival kit that I mentioned, I mean, that was something I never in a million years thought I could pull off in like a weekend. And so that's also a great lesson of what are we stopping ourselves from doing because we don't think it's possible, that when, really pushed, we could. And so I think then getting really concrete about what those things are. Like, how well are we in touch with the people we serve, with our customers, with our partners, with whatever that is? How quickly were we able to identify what their most pressing needs were in that moment? Or is that a blind spot for us? And then prioritizing those things about where you're going to get the greatest benefit or where the biggest problems are, and then starting to address them going forward. So, I mean, it seems like it's not action oriented because it's, yes, let's take a step back and learn, but we can react really quickly and maybe not make the best choices, or we can pause for a little bit and really learn so that our energy and our changes and our actions are intentional.
I think that's really sound advice again, right? So I think there are lots and lots of nuggets, Nancy, which you've shared with us. And I think this is really sound advice because this is one of the things that we're doing, right? Right now, because of the crisis, a lot of us are sitting there strategizing, thinking about where we want to go, doing things that we were unable to do with this publication that you've come out with. maybe you had it at the back of your head, oh, I want to do it, but didn't do it, right? So why can't we take let's say sometime every week and just sit and think back, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what are the new lessons learned, what could we have done better? So this is an exercise, by the way, very easily we used to do it at Habib University. So we were talking about that before as well. After every event, after every initiative that we had taken, we would sit back as a team and think about, okay, what could we have done better? What did I personally not do well enough, right? Could I have sent out the invites even before they were designed? Could I have poked people and really asked them, are they available for this particular day? Could have done anything which could have improved, right? And then incremental learning. I think that's really important as well. Little by little, then you implement, you pilot, you shift gears. So look, thank you very, very much, Nancy, for joining us. If you have any parting thoughts, please go ahead and share them with us, and then we'll, call it a night. Or for you, it's still early.
Or a morning.
Yes.
I guess my parting thought is, so there are two questions that I encourage people to ask in the immediate early days of COVID that I think are good ones to just check in with ourselves when we're feeling like everything is uncertain or the earth is shifting beneath us. Especially when looking at our strategies and seeing if they're still valid. So one question is, what was true before this thing happened, whatever it is? What was true before that is still true or even more true now? Because that keeps us grounded in our core values, in the cause, that we're advocating. And then the second question is, what was true before that is no longer true? And that helps us see, okay, assumptions we had, beliefs we had, no longer valid. What do we do differently? But don't abandon those things that are still true, because oftentimes there's more there than we think.
Okay, yes. All right. Everything that you're saying, I just take a pause with it because I'm quickly thinking, okay, how do I apply that? This makes sense. So thank you so much, Nancy. I've personally learned a lot. I know everybody who's been watching has learned a lot. And I'm sure there are going to be a lot more people who will watch later, because we find that, people come back and look at all of this content that everybody's been creating. So thank you. And let's continue our conversation offline as well. And hope to have you back released really, really soon.
Thank you. This was great. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Okay, thank you. Bye. All right, so that was Nancy Murphy, and I hope that you guys got a lot of information, just like we did, just like I did, and I'm glad that some of the entrepreneurs, some of the usual suspects are watching. I hope you're learning as much as we are. Very quickly, I'd like to highlight that on Saturday I'm going to be back with Impacting Lives, same time, 8 p.m. This time around it's with Jahara, who is the president of Pasha. And she's also the founder of the Nest IO in Karachi. So I'm really looking forward to talking to this fantastic role model of somebody who's been smashing it her entire life. So do come back on Saturday, and looking forward to seeing you guys. Okay, bye.